Imagine one quiet afternoon, walking through your neighborhood in Maine. You hear whispers of an operation, an unseen force ready to descend. Federal agents, armed with power and determination, are preparing to target a community you've called home for years. This isn't just about policy, it's about people. Somali refugees, a group who've sought refuge in America, now find themselves under the shadow of looming deportation. This isn't an isolated event, it's part of a broader campaign stretching from Maine to Minnesota. President Trump has repeatedly singled out Somali immigrants, accusing them of being criminals, fraudsters, people who ruin communities. The question is, why now? What is driving this aggressive movement, and what are its real consequences? The stage is set for a showdown, one that will reshape the lives of many. But the true story isn't just about what happens next, it's about what this moment tells us about the future of immigration in America. To truly understand the gravity of what's unfolding, we must first dissect the heart of the issue. President Trump's rhetoric paints a stark picture of Somali refugees as a threat to the country, a narrative of scammers and criminals. These claims, which have made headlines across the nation, fuel an environment where fear and division flourish. But let's pause for a moment. Is this really about the actions of a few individuals, or is this a symptom of something deeper? The tension surrounding Somali refugees in Maine is not just an isolated event. It's part of a broader conversation about immigration in the U.S., a conversation that has been shaped by politics, fear, and perhaps most importantly, misunderstanding. The coming operation, aimed at rounding up Somali immigrants for what could be a lengthy review process, is framed as a way to combat fraud. But what happens when the very people being targeted are already part of a community that has struggled for years to find acceptance in their new home? To truly grasp the significance of what's happening now, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. This isn't the first time immigrant communities have faced intense scrutiny. Throughout American history, marginalized groups have often found themselves in the crosshairs of political and social tension. The Somali community's journey in the U.S. began as refugees fleeing war and famine, but their arrival was met with challenges, economic pressures, discrimination, and an uphill battle for integration. For years, Maine's Somali immigrants struggled with limited resources, high unemployment, and a lack of public understanding about their culture. Yet many persevered, contributing to their communities in ways that went unnoticed by the broader public. But as with every refugee population, a crisis point eventually comes. The pressures of economic hardship, compounded by political attacks, create an environment ripe for division. When one group becomes scapegoated, the system of government enforcement steps in, looking for solutions that often feel more like punishments. A spark can ignite a wildfire, and in this case, it was President Trump's inflammatory rhetoric that lit the fuse. During a speech to the Detroit Economic Club, Trump singled out Maine's Somali community, calling them scammers and declaring that they would be getting out. His words stoked a fire, not just in Maine, but across the nation. The accusations were not new. Trump had long targeted Somali immigrants, using their presence in the U.S. as a talking point in his broader immigration campaign. But this time the stakes were higher. With the administration hinting at an operation targeting Somali refugees in Maine, a sense of urgency grew within the community. The fear of deportation became palpable, a looming threat in the everyday lives of many Somali families. Local officials like Lewiston's Mayor Sheline quickly reacted, urging residents to prepare for what could be a sudden federal crackdown. The message was clear: there was a storm on the horizon, and the community needed to brace itself. Behind every government operation lies a mechanism, a system designed to carry out policy at a granular level. In this case, the planned IC operation in Maine is not just about rounding up people. It's about scrutinizing the very foundations of refugee status, examining each case under a magnifying glass. The justification? Fraud allegedly rampant within Somali-run institutions, particularly daycares, leading to a wave of public distrust. But what does this really mean for the Somali community? On the surface, it appears as a crackdown on criminality. In reality, it's a profound act of institutional scrutiny aimed at immigrant communities. These operations, carried out by ICE's Enforcement and Removal Operations (ERO), are underpinned by the belief that these individuals might have entered the U.S. under false pretenses. The question arises, can a community be held accountable for the alleged wrongdoings of a few? And even more importantly, how do we distinguish between those truly guilty of fraud and those who are simply caught in the crossfire of a broken system? As the rhetoric escalates, the operation grows. What started as an idea is now a reality, a looming federal presence in Maine. The surge of ICE agents, initially focused on Minnesota, is now reaching beyond state lines into the heart of Maine's Somali community. The operation is no longer a theoretical threat. It's a matter of weeks, if not days, before the crackdown begins. The tension in the community is undeniable. Families are on edge, businesses are uncertain, and fear is pervasive. For many Somali refugees, this is not just about immigration enforcement, it's about the very survival of their community. The heightened presence of ICE represents more than just enforcement. It's a direct assault on the sense of security these refugees had worked so hard to build. In a state already grappling with economic challenges, this move feels like a slap in the face to those who thought they had finally found a place to call home. Now they face the possibility of being torn away from their lives, their families, their livelihoods, all in the name of addressing alleged fraud that for many seems far removed from their day-to-day existence. For the Somali community in Maine, this is more than just an operation. It's an existential threat. The fear of deportation is real, palpable, as families watch their lives hang in the balance. But amid this fear, there is also a remarkable resilience. These are people who have survived war, famine, and loss. And yet, they now find themselves fighting another battle, this time against a system that sees them as outsiders, as threats. In Lewiston, where the Somali community has made its home, the local mayor urged businesses and residents to be prepared. Know your rights, he said. But for many, what's at stake goes beyond legal rights. It's about identity, community, and belonging. For the Somali refugees, this operation is not just about the possibility of deportation, it's about the fear of losing everything they've worked for in a country that promised safety and opportunity. Yet, even in the face of uncertainty, there's strength. Somali families who have endured so much are now drawing upon that same strength. They are not just fighting for their homes, they're fighting for their future, their dignity. While the operation in Maine may seem localized, its implications are far-reaching. Immigration enforcement does not occur in a vacuum. The actions taken in one part of the U.S. often echo through the global landscape. This operation targeting Somali refugees sends a powerful message not just to the community in Maine, but to immigrant communities across the world. From a geopolitical perspective, these moves are closely watched. Other countries with significant Somali populations, such as Canada, the UK, and Sweden, may now face increased pressure from their own citizens to act in similar ways. If the US takes a hardline stance against Somali refugees, it sets a precedent, a model for other nations to follow. Beyond the borders of the US, the operation also affects Somalia itself. The political ramifications are significant. The threat of mass deportations sends a message to those still living in Somalia, considering a future in the U.S., a message that the welcoming environment they once hoped for may no longer exist. The operation may have started in Maine, but its ripples are felt far beyond. As we look toward the future, three possible paths emerge from the storm that is brewing. The first scenario, the most optimistic, is one where the operation fizzles out, where public backlash, legal challenges, and local resistance prevent the federal government from carrying out its full-scale plans. In this scenario, the Somali community in Maine remains intact, and the operation's ripple effects across the nation are minimized. It would signal that, even in the face of harsh political rhetoric, there are still checks and balances that protect vulnerable populations. The second scenario is a middle ground where the operation proceeds but is met with heavy scrutiny. It could lead to partial deportations, but widespread community support and advocacy may force the government to limit its reach, focusing only on the most egregious cases. While this would still leave many families in uncertainty, it could spark a larger conversation about reforming immigration practices, leading to potential legislative action in the long term. The third and most troubling scenario sees the operation go forward without resistance. In this reality, Maine's Somali population is decimated. Deportations rise, and the ripple effect of distrust spreads beyond the Somali community, affecting other immigrant populations as well. In this future, the promise of America as a land of opportunity for refugees and immigrants seems increasingly hollow. The operation targeting Somali refugees in Maine is not just a political event, it's a moment of reflection for the entire nation. What does it say about us, about our values, and about our commitment to the ideals we claim to hold dear? As we face the future, we must ask ourselves, are we prepared to tear apart the very communities that contribute to the richness of our nation? Are we willing to ignore the humanity of those who came here seeking refuge, seeking a chance for a better life? This is a critical moment. The choices we make now will echo for generations. The Somali community in Maine and across the nation needs our support, not just in words but in action. Whether through legal resistance, grassroots advocacy, or simply speaking out against unjust policies, we all have a role to play in shaping the future. Let us not be remembered as the generation that turned its back on the vulnerable. Let us stand together with compassion and justice to create a future where no one has to live in fear of being torn from the place they call home.